I knew something was wrong the moment my son stopped smiling. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic. It happened in a room full of people who kept laughing, kept eating, kept pretending nothing had shifted. But I saw it, the way his eyes searched the table, the way his shoulders pulled inward like he was bracing for cold. We were at my mother-in-law's house for her birthday. Balloons, wrapped gifts, phones already out to record. She had planned one of her memory moments, the kind she loved to curate. A small speech, then gifts handed out to the grandchildren. A ritual she'd done before. A moment meant to be sweet. She called the first name, then the second, then the third. Each child stepped forward. Each received a small envelope and a hug. Cameras flashed. People clapped softly. My son stayed seated. At first, I assumed it was a mistake, that his name was coming next. I leaned forward slightly, ready to nudge him when it was his turn. But she didn't pause. She smiled, folded her hands, and said, "All right, that's everyone." The room moved on instantly. Conversations resumed. Plates clinked. Someone laughed too loudly. My son didn't cry. That's what made it worse. He looked at me instead. Not confused, just checking. Like he needed to know if I had seen it too. I met his eyes and nodded once. "I see you." My mother-in-law avoided looking in our direction. Not in an obvious way. In the careful way of someone who knows exactly what they've done and trusts the noise of a room to cover it. I waited for someone to correct it, a cousin, an aunt, anyone. No one did. And in that silence, something settled in my chest, not anger yet, not even shock. Just a cold, steady understanding. This wasn't a mistake, this was a choice. And while the party went on, while cake was cut and pictures were taken, I stayed very still, because I knew one thing with absolute clarity. If I moved too soon, I'd miss what this moment was really telling me, and I wasn't going to miss it. I didn't say anything that day, not in the car on the way home, not when my son finally asked in a small, careful voice if he'd done something wrong, not when my husband gripped the steering wheel a little tighter than usual and kept his eyes on the road. I answered my son simply, too simply. "No, you didn't do anything wrong." He nodded, but the way he nodded told me he didn't fully believe it yet. That night, after he was asleep, the moment replayed itself, slower this time, sharper. And once my mind stopped trying to excuse it, other memories started lining up behind it. The Christmas where the cousins' stockings were full and his had one gift fewer. The school play she attended for the other grandchildren, but couldn't make for his. The way she praised them loudly, affectionately, while complimenting my son in quieter, flatter tones, if at all. At the time, I'd explained it away. Different personalities, oversight, generational awkwardness. I told myself not to be that parent, the one who assumes harm where there's none. But the birthday wasn't ambiguous. It wasn't subtle enough to hide behind politeness. It happened in front of witnesses, and she counted carefully. I could still hear her voice saying, "That's everyone," confident, satisfied. I thought about the way she hadn't looked at us afterward, not even to check, especially not to apologize. I realized then how much labor I'd been doing for her, softening her edges, translating her behavior, protecting my child from noticing what I didn't want to name. And worse, I'd been teaching him to accept it. The idea made my stomach turn. The next morning, I watched him eat breakfast, quiet and thoughtful. And I wondered how many moments like that he'd already stored away. How many times he'd learned, silently, that love could be uneven and still be presented as normal. That's when the question finally surfaced. Not emotional, not reactive, just clear. How long was I willing to let my child be the lesson someone else refused to learn? I didn't confront her yet. I didn't need to, because once you see a pattern, you don't unsee it. And I knew now that what I was dealing with wasn't carelessness. It was hierarchy. And my child had been placed exactly where she intended him to be. The confirmation came quietly. A week later, my mother-in-law called like nothing had happened. Same tone, same casual warmth. She talked about the weather, a neighbor's new car, a recipe she'd tried and didn't like. She never mentioned the birthday, not once. I let her talk. I needed to hear how comfortable she was inside her silence. Near the end of the call, I said evenly, "I wanted to ask you something about your party." There was the smallest pause, not long enough to be obvious, but long enough to register. "Oh," she said. "When you handed out the envelopes," I continued, "you didn't call my son's name." Another pause, longer this time. "Well," she said slowly, "I didn't think it would matter. He's young. He probably didn't even notice." I closed my eyes. "I noticed," I said. She laughed lightly, the way people do when they're trying to brush something away. "You're being sensitive. I can't always do everything for everyone." I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just asked one more question. "You remembered everyone else?" Silence. Then, carefully, "Some children are closer. That's just how families are." There it was. No denial, no apology. Just justification wrapped in inevitability. She wasn't embarrassed. She wasn't remorseful. She was explaining the rules to me, assuming I'd accept them the way I always had. I thought about my son's face at that table, the way he'd waited, the way he'd looked to me for confirmation that he still belonged. And in that moment, something in me hardened, not into anger, but resolve. "I see," I said. She seemed relieved, like she'd won something. "Good. I'm glad you understand." I did understand, completely. She didn't dislike my child. She simply didn't value him enough to treat him equally, and expected me to make peace with that. When we hung up, my hands were steady, my chest was calm. The decision had already made itself. This wasn't a misunderstanding to fix. It was a line she'd drawn, and now it was my turn to decide what to do with it. I didn't announce anything. That's the part people always expect. The confrontation, the dramatic cutoff, the speech that finally says all the things you've swallowed for years. But endings like that aren't loud, not the real ones. The real ending happened the next time an invitation came. A group message lit up my phone a few weeks later. Another gathering, another memory moment. My mother-in-law's words were cheerful, generous on the surface. "Can't wait to have all the family together again." I stared at the screen for a long time. My son was on the floor nearby, lining up his toy cars with intense concentration. He hummed softly to himself, peaceful in the way children are when they feel safe, when they're not bracing for exclusion, when they're not waiting to see if love will skip over them. And I understood something then that I wish I'd understood sooner. Protection doesn't start when harm becomes obvious. It starts when you stop offering access to people who require your child to be smaller in order to be tolerated. I typed a short reply, polite, neutral, unemotional. "We won't be able to make it." No explanation, no excuses. She responded almost immediately. "Oh, is everything all right?" I didn't answer. Days passed. Then a phone call, then another message. Concern crept into her tone. Not for my son, not for what she'd done, but for the disruption of the pattern, for the fact that something had changed without her permission. Eventually, she tried a softer approach. She sent a gift addressed to my son, not an apology, a substitute, as if an object could smooth over a hierarchy she still hadn't disowned. I returned it unopened. That was when the silence began. Family members noticed first. Questions trickled in. Why we weren't coming around as much. Why my son wasn't at the gatherings anymore. I didn't explain. I didn't defend. I didn't recruit allies. I simply said, "We're doing what's best for our child." Some understood immediately. Others didn't. A few were uncomfortable enough to distance themselves too. And that told me everything I needed to know. My mother-in-law never apologized. Not really. There were moments where she hinted at reconciliation, miscommunications, hurt feelings on both sides, not meaning anything by it, always framed to protect her intent, never my child's experience. I declined every opening. Because here's the truth no one likes to say out loud. If someone can watch your child be excluded and feel justified, they don't deserve proximity to that child. My son didn't ask why we stopped going, not at first. He just noticed that life felt calmer, that he wasn't scanning rooms anymore, that he wasn't waiting for his name to be skipped. Months later, he said something small, almost offhand, that stayed with me. I like our weekends better now. That was it. That was the confirmation. I didn't end things out of spite. I didn't do it to punish anyone. I did it because my child learned something important without ever needing it explained. That love doesn't come with conditions he has to earn. That belonging isn't a competition. That the people who are allowed close are the ones who choose him, fully. And my mother-in-law? She lost access not because she excluded my child once, but because she expected me to accept it. I ended it there, quietly, permanently, and without regret.